Myanmar citizens living overseas are casting their votes ahead of a general election on November the 8th. But the journey to the ballot box is not an easy one, whether abroad or back home. Young White Kid explains.
A glimpse of what some 37 million Myanmar voters would have to abide by when they go to the polls in the November 8 general election amid rising concerns of a spike in COVID-19 cases in Myanmar. This month, Myanmar residents overseas showed how they cast their ballots at their embassies and consulates following strict health protocols.
Now, these voters behind me are among 32,000 eligible voters who will be casting their ballot at the Myanmar embassy here in Singapore in the next 18 days. Now, that works out to about 200 voters per hour. The Myanmar embassy here tells me that they have allocated each voter a time slot for them to cast their ballot. And this embassy here is among 45 other embassies, missions and consulates around the world who will be facilitating overseas votes for Myanmar nationals.
I hope develop my country so we can next generation for more good.
It's important for our country to get better in getting democracy.
My vote is for my country, for our children.
I'm not really disappointed. It's just I hope I was at home because it feels nicer. You know, it feels warm, safe. It feels like home.
But for many, getting to the ballot box overseas isn't a smooth journey. For one, voters must fill up a physical form called Form 15 and email a scanned copy to the embassy. In the last overseas elections in Singapore, many Myanmar workers turned to volunteers who would help out with the paperwork.
Most Myanmar people, they like to visit the peninsula and then they provide their particular to some of the volunteers. They just consolidate and combine and send it to embassy.
But Singapore's COVID-19 lockdown measures early this year meant movements were restricted. To help their countrymen, Alexander and 8 of his friends based here set up an online system to ease overseas voters' paperwork. Their online system cuts down extra steps, especially useful for those who have no idea how to scan physical forms or email them. This election, some 110,000 Myanmar people overseas registered to vote out of some 4 million Myanmar citizens who are working abroad.
In the past, it would have been quite an easy feat for, say, someone from Myanmar based in Singapore to board a flight and go home to cast their vote. Unfortunately, the pandemic situation does not provide that kind of conducive environment for people to do so.
In Thailand, home to some 2 million Myanmar workers, only some 39,000 will be voting. That's because many who work in provinces bordering Myanmar won't be able to travel all the way to embassy grounds in Bangkok or Chiang Mai. But it may not necessarily be any easier for voters back home too. Not when Myanmar is currently battling a second and more serious wave of COVID-19 1 month before the elections. Already, campaigning is taking a back seat. Lockdowns in cities like Yangon and Rakhine mean no walkabouts, no physical rallies or campaigning. But the authorities are pressing on with the polls. Recently, the government spelled out safety rules for the setting up of polling stations. Voters, including COVID-19 patients, have been given specific instructions to follow to cast a ballot safely. Still, many questions remain. Will people feel safe enough to come out to vote? And if they do, are the authorities able to effectively restrict the movement of potentially 37 million voters who will be out and about on November 8? Young White Kid, CNA.